5 or 6 questions, and we'll try to get through them as fast as possible. I know you don't have a lot of time, and that's okay. In your work, you discuss the period of armed struggle in the U.S., the 60s into the 70s, as a response to centuries of enslavement, apartheid, and state violence. You also highlight the importance of legal and mass defense with figures like William Patterson in the 1930s, through the Smith Act trials, and obviously Angela Davis as well. What do you see as the key mistakes made during this period of armed struggle, and what material conditions led those certain groups to take up armed struggle at that particular time?
Well, with regard to your latter question, you've already sketched the reasons. That is to say, state violence in the first instance. The LAPD, as you know more than most, has a justifiable reputation for violence. As I tell the story, there was a perception in the LAPD ranks that they were understaffed. For example, even today, I think that the force constitutes about 9,000 or so. Back in the day, it was 7,000 or so. By way of comparison, New York City, with a larger population but a smaller area to patrol, had about 37,000 officers or more in the ranks. And therefore, the LAPD felt that they had to engage in a kind of draconian deterrence. That is to say, to make every encounter that particularly Black people had with the force to be memorable, so that the word would be circulated that you do not want to cross the line into, quote, illegality, unquote, because you may not make it back to the land of the living. I think that that was a major trigger for picking up the gun. But of course, there are other issues as well. Mass incarceration, for example, the crisis of everyday living, which in many ways is a lineal descendant of being descended from an enslaved population and then being subjected to a horrific Jim Crow. The reasons were countless. Now, with regard to eras, as you may have gathered from this book, I apply some of my reasoning and historical excavations of slavery going back to the 1500s to this current story that deals with the period mostly from the 1960s and 1970s going forward to the present day. In other words, as I tell the story, the United States has been a settler colonial regime that helps to explicate the genocide inflicted upon the indigenous population. That is to say that the United States in its history is not far distant from what is now Zimbabwe, what is now Namibia, where you had the first genocide of the 20th century, 1904 to 1908, visited upon the Herero and Nama people. Not far distant from Algeria, which had a French settler population, leading to a bloody conflict culminating in independence in 1962, not to mention the giants of settler colonialism, speaking of South Africa and Kenya. And of course, I could go on to talk about historic Palestine and Israel, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, etc. And that's an important concept because my position is that settler colonialism historically has been undergirded and underpinned by class collaboration, particularly amongst the settlers. If you look at my book on the 16th century, for example, you'll find that when London first got into this nasty business of sending settlers across the Atlantic, in this instance in the 1580s to what they called North Carolina, it was a heterogeneous mixture of various class elements, declassed elements, shopkeepers, workers, lumpen elements, all sponsored by the 1%, but all determined to uproot the indigenous and with luck and pluck, being able to drag Africans kicking and screaming across the Atlantic to work for free, leading to mutual enrichment. And as I tell the story, the enslaved population, and of course, the Black population in the United States is heavily descendant from the enslaved population. has been forced to engage in class struggle. That is to say, malingering, uprisings, arsons, attempted killings of enslavers, joining with Native Americans to uproot the settlers, joining with foreign invasions, such as during the War of 1812, when the United States tried to seize Canada. And in return, you saw Africans in Washington, D.C., joining with the Redcoats to basically burn down the White House, sending President Madison and his girlish spouse, Dolly, fleeing into the streets one step ahead of the posse. So the long and the short of it is that class struggle and class collaboration do not mix very well. And what I tried to suggest is that that particular concept was not altogether grasped. And as I say in the book that you made an oblique reference to, my most recent book, African Americans and the New History of the United States of America, I suggest that one of the many reasons why Black people have been subjected to so many atrocities, not only because of our unwillingness, reluctance to support a settler revolt in 1776, not unlike the settler revolt in Algeria a few decades prior to now, and that that lies close to the heart of this oppression and persecution to which we have been subjected.